Hey everybody, Michael Davis here. Welcome to Bone2Pick, and we are back and thrilled to be so. And we're starting at the top as we get things rolling again. We've got one of the greatest French horn players in the history of the instrument with us today, the great Chris Komer. Chris has been a friend of mine for a long time, and I've been looking forward to the opportunity to sit down with him. We had planned to do it before the pandemic started, so we're getting to it right now, and couldn't be happier that he's here today. Chris has been one of the top call freelance players in New York City for about the past 20-25 years or so. He is the principal horn of the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra. He is a member of the Burning River Brass. He's the instructor of horn at Princeton University. He has performed with quite an array of orchestras, including the New York Philharmonic, Cleveland Orchestra, Orpheus Chamber Orchestra, the Milwaukee Symphony, the Houston Symphony. And he possesses the rarest of qualities for a French horn player in that he's equally comfortable in a jazz club or in a studio or on the concert stage. It's quite remarkable the depth of musicianship that this man brings to the French horn. Among his vast array of recording credits in that world are J.J. Johnson, McCoy Tyner, Herbie Hancock, Connick Jr., Barbra Streisand, Sting, Audra McDonald, Tony Bennett, Chico O'Farrill, the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra, just to name a few. He has dozens of motion picture soundtrack credits, as well as Broadway shows and television commercials. He received his Bachelor of Music from the Cleveland Institute of Music and got his Master's from the Manhattan School of Music. And I have to say, on a personal note, as I mentioned, I've been friends and a colleague of Chris's for years. I'm super honored that he was... that we were fortunate to get him to play on the original Brass Nation 21 years ago now, and he played some amazing French horn on the 20th anniversary special edition. Actually, we used that in the opening music there. Some incredible playing from Chris. He also was featured on my 5 brass quintet CD that came out a couple years ago. Some spectacular playing from Chris on that. He's also been involved in the Hip Bone Music publications. Featured on the 20-minute warm-up for French horn, the Brass Buzz French horn, Just Add French horn. It's been an honor to get to work with Chris and just be a part of his great musicianship. So, Chris, without further ado, thank you for coming all the way over to New City and being with us today.
Well, thank you, Mike. Thanks. Real pleasure to be here, and been looking forward to this for a while to chat with you.
Wow, thanks. Well, thanks for being here. I want to start with your early years in Kansas City, but first, we have to talk about the Concord Blue Devils. When I was reviewing your resume, one of the things I didn't think I was going to see is drum and bugle corps, and it said you have a passion for that. And having grown up in the Bay Area, and I had a lot of friends of mine that were in the Santa Clara Vanguard, and so the Concord Blue Devils were your big rival. So just give us a quick snippet about your drum and bugle corps experience.
Well, my junior year in high school, my band director had some connections with the guys that ran the Blue Devils, and they had a late opening in the French horn bugle line, and they wanted to hear a tape from me, so I sent a tape out, and the next thing they know, they got me on a bus to go out to play in the Blue Devils, and I was 17, I had no idea what I was getting into, but it was... a life-changing experience that I'll never forget. And a lot of brass instructors, my horn teacher in high school said, "Oh, you don't want to do that. That's bad for your chops. Stay away from that kind of thing." But what I tell you, I had a great time. I learned a lot about music. I got much stronger as a player. My just whole breathing apparatus, and I think a lot of the really top corps take very good care of your chops. I mean, some of the, the smaller corps, maybe not as experienced instructors, can get you beat up in the chop category. But I recommend it. I don't recommend doing it for 7 years, but I mean, a summer or two doing drum corps, I think it's great. I had a great time. I got the first time really traveling around the country, and it was just a treat. And I still, there's still a deep love for drum corps. And I try to go to shows whenever I can. I mean, it's just, it's really an art form. And people think, oh, it's like marching band. It really is not like marching band. My high school marching band was not a great experience. But the drum corps was fun and done on a very high level. And we played jazz. We played Stan Kenton charts. We played Chuck Mangione charts. We were kind of one of the few corps that were, trying to, really put the big band jazz sound onto the field. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I know. Even seeing some shows, being from the Bay Area, it was like that's on a whole nother level than marching band. The sophistication and the material, the repertoire and everything. So
we actually lost to the Santa Clara Vanguard that year.
Oh, okay.
We got second place by a half a tenth of a point to the Santa Clara Vanguard.
Sorry to bring up those memories as we start the interview, but I had to ask you about that. Let's talk a little bit about you growing up in Kansas City area and what that was like. Were you around music from an early age? And just I know that's a great place to be, a great part of the country. So what was that like for you?
Well, it's good to be a musician because there's not as many distractions. I think I did grow up in a musical family. My dad was a very accomplished country music person. He played pedal steel and played a lot on the weekends. My mother was a very good pianist and singer. They actually met in the church choir. So, we had a piano at home, always music being played in the house, all kinds of. My mom liked Broadway shows and all kinds of different music. My dad mostly stuck to country music, but I did grow up in a nice metropolitan area that had a very good youth symphony. So when I was just starting out, I started on trumpet, but when I switched to horn and started taking lessons, I got into the Junior Youth Symphony of Kansas City at an early age. And that, I remember the very first thing I played in that orchestra, which is the first time I'm in an ensemble bigger than like 9 kids, because that was, elementary band, we had like 9 kids. So I'm 6th grade, now I'm sitting in a full, 50, 60 kids. And the first thing I remember playing was Swan Lake, the music from Swan Lake. Wow. And I literally couldn't believe my mind. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And just to be a part of that, I think that's, that was the beginning of this whole like mind-blowing idea of playing music for a living, And so we had a, very good music program in our school district. I was lucky for that. Good band directors. I then decided to go to Wichita State University for my first 3 years of undergrad, which I think was a really good choice for me because I was, kind of the big fish in the small pond. And I think if I had moved to New York when I was right out of high school, I think I would have crumbled. I just don't think I would have had the confidence to survive in the New York competitive, especially the schools, Juilliard, Manhattan School, very competitive situation. The kids they try to be friendly, but there's always this backstabbing. Everyone's ready to, get a leg up on you. So I think that was a good move, and Wichita State had a very good jazz program, and I was already dabbling on the piano, so I took a few improv classes on piano. I happened to end up being roommates with Matt Wilson, who is a very famous jazz drummer now. Mike,
sure,
you played with him.
I love this. We had this conversation before, and it's like blew my mind. Share with us how Matt kind of encouraged you to get into.
Matt was way into jazz already, and had brought from Illinois this gigantic collection of vinyl, And my jazz was basically Maynard Ferguson and Buddy Rich. That's about all I had listened to until then. And so suddenly I had Coltrane and Miles Davis and all this Michael Brecker, who I'd never heard before. And every day I would come home and just stick on a different album. And Matt was very encouraging and just a very, charismatic, positive guy. And he was like, well, you should do some jazz French horn. You could really do something with that. And I was like, no, I really kind of more into the piano right now. That's kind of really what I wanted. He was like, okay, yeah, your piano's good too, but you could be like the Eddie Van Halen of the French horn. So Matt was an early influence, and I ended up getting into the second big band at Wichita State and playing in the same rhythm section as him for a year. And then I went to Cleveland Institute to finish my undergrad and kind of went more into the classical scene with the Cleveland Orchestra in the background and getting to play extra with the Cleveland Orchestra and just really loving it and realizing that I wanted to be a serious orchestral musician and had gotten into a couple of the really good festivals like Tanglewood, where I got to work with Leonard Bernstein and Seiji Ozawa and Kurt Mazur. And that brought me to New York eventually, and Manhattan School, and working with David Jolly at Manhattan School was great. But New York becomes your teacher, as you know. So then you were just going out to hear all this incredible, that's when jazz really got its hooks in me. Going out to hear all this great music, great young players. I was living near a club called Augie's up on the Upper West Side, it's now a different club called Smoke, but there was no cover, no minimum. You could sit in the corner and nurse a Rolling Rock all night and hear, all these incredible young players that no one had ever heard of. Guys like Joel Fromm, Scott Wendell. These were before anyone knew who they were. And then the last set, they would always open it up and guys would sit in, But that really opened up my mind, and I was thinking these are the guys I want to play with. So
it is amazing, like the range of, I talked about it in the intro a little bit, and we'll talk about it at great length going on, but when you hear, for those of you who don't know Chris's jazz playing, it's like listening to a tenor saxophone player. There's no part of it that makes me feel like, oh wow, isn't that cute that you're playing jazz on French horn? Not at all. It's like serious high level jazz playing on the French, happens to be on the French horn, but you're a serious improviser in addition to the orchestral side of your career. So that you would say like that was right after you got out of Manhattan School of Music, you kind of like really started taking the possibility of playing jazz on the French horn seriously, taking Matt's words at Wichita State to heart?
I realized that when I got to New York, that New York had about 10,000 great jazz pianists. And, I really was way behind the ball on that. But as far as like jazz horn playing, there was a handful of guys doing it, but I felt like that would be one way for me to kind of carve a niche in New York. And plus, I just really started to really enjoy improvising and realize that the horn is a great jazz instrument. It's a great sound for jazz, somewhere between the flugelhorn and the trombone, and it's a great sound for jazz. And I actually think that it's easier on the horn than the trombone, because you guys, you got the slide to deal with. We got the vowels, but the reason why there's very few jazz horn players is we're just not in the scene. We don't play in the jazz band in junior high and high school. I happen to played trumpet. I kept playing trumpet in the jazz band in junior high, and then in high school, I actually played trombone.
Really?
Wow. High school jazz band. Yeah, I think I still have my olds with the F attachment laying around somewhere.
Well, keep it in the case if you don't mind, all right?
But so I had a little bit of the foot in the door doing that, but most French horn players just never get a chance to do that. You don't ever get a chance to play in a good jazz group. So that's why we're always on an outsider. So it was on me to sort of be proactive in creating my own little scene. You know, I remember right away I knew that no one was going to call me for jam sessions. You know, because first of all, you never think of calling, oh, you know, it'd be great if we get a French horn player to come to our rehearsal this afternoon. So I basically decided to host my own sessions. So I got a nice piano, I got a drum set. I'm on the 5th floor of a walk-up building, so I got my own bass too. And so the guys didn't have to bring any of their equipment. And in the beginning, yeah, it was really hard to get anyone to come over because they didn't know who I was. And, you know, French horn, the first thing they think of is, well, this is going to be lame. So, but, you know, you make enough calls and you maybe do some big band gig somewhere where you meet somebody that seems to like the idea of jazz French horn, and you can drag them to the session, and they drag their bass player friend, and then he trusts you to bring a pianist that he knows, and from there I just kept working it, and you know, of course the play-alongs are. You know, there's a kind of a camp that says, you know, don't do the jazz play-alongs.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Don't do that. Just, you know, play live, you know, learn it, you know, but they don't play a non-traditional jazz instrument. Yeah. Anyone who says that, do not play a non-traditional jazz instrument. So Jamie Aebersold taught me how to play jazz, you know, seriously.
Just from,
Just for playing, you know, playing along with that. I mean, I honestly think that it's easy to get bogged down with the books, but I tell everyone, just throw the CD on and just start playing along. And don't get bogged down with the you know, the exercises or the, unless you're stuck, then go back in and maybe get some ideas. But, you know, now there's all kinds of good play along type tools that you can use. But,
well, meanwhile, while all that you're developing as a jazz artist, your orchestral career starts flourishing, and you're subbing with all these great orchestras. We talked about St. Luke's today, and ultimately we will talk at great length about your position now with the New Jersey Symphony in a minute. But what was the path like in terms of? I know you've played with all these orchestras, Cleveland and New York and Houston, and so. What was going on in your kind of parallel career in the orchestral world? Yeah,
well, and that's a good way to put it. You know, I always kind of felt like there was kind of two tracks going at once in my career, and I was taking auditions. I was trying to get the big orchestra job, you know, and I had minimal success with that. Sometimes I would get advanced and go on to the next round. I think the farthest I got at the New York Philharmonic was final 7 for the third horn job. But it ended up winning the third horn job with the New Jersey Symphony, and I did that for about 5 years, and all the time I was doing that, I was getting the freelance thing in New York going pretty well, and was getting called for Broadway shows. And Orpheus, I was touring a lot with Orpheus, and a fair amount of studio work. So I gave the job up. And then 10 years later, my situation had changed. That job had gotten a lot better. the third horn job came open again, and I auditioned again and got the third horn job again. And then 5 years ago, won the principal horn job there when it finally opened up. So
I love the story you told me when we were driving over today, how you ended up having to leave the first time because your pioneering spirit came out when you got called to go on tour with Barbra Streisand, and you realized how important that gig was. And tell us about that a little bit, that motivated you to say, I'm going to leave this full-time gig because I know this is going to launch another side of my career.
Yeah, well, the New Jersey Symphony had fairly relaxed attendance rules, but you did have to play a certain percentage of the season. And I had gotten kind of behind on my percentage. I was doing a lot of touring with Orpheus Chamber Orchestra, and I had a Broadway show at the time. So at the end of the season, got this great call to do a tour with Barbra Streisand and a double CD, and it was all the top studio guys, that I hadn't really worked with yet. So it was really my first chance to kind of get my foot in the door of the top studio recording work, and I was going to have to go over my limit by 2 services, and I petitioned the orchestra to let me, go over that limit, but they weren't having it. So I decided, I can't turn this down. This is really more of what I want to be doing right now. And it worked out great. For 10 years, I had, basically as much work as I wanted. The reason why I went back was I had gotten the idea for my summer retreat project in Montana, and I wanted my summers free, but I wanted a little bit more steady, solid work with health insurance, because that had all the health insurance was taken care of there. So that's why I went back to the orchestra.
Cool. Okay, I mentioned it in the intro, but you have quite an impressive list of jazz artists that you've recorded with and performed with. I'm just going to throw out a few names and just tell us your memories of the projects, even if it's just one project. But we'll start with one of my heroes, with every trombone player alive hero, the great J.J. Johnson.
Well, that was his Brassworks album, which was a mega project with a large group. I remember it was like 6 trumpets. John Faddis, Lou Soloff were on that. 4 French horns, and just some fantastic arrangements. All different composers contributed works. Robin Eubanks did an arrangement on that record. But that was one of my earliest big time record dates, to be in the room with JJ and all those guys that I've been, listening to and hearing them out for so long, to just be sitting in that studio. I mean, that pinched me. I never dreamed as a kid in Kansas. I mean, I didn't dream of half of this stuff, but certainly didn't dream of doing anything like that. Yeah. So
I never got to meet JJ, but obviously influenced every single person who ever picked up a trombone, that's for sure. But people like Douglas Purviance and Robin, they would talk about his attention to detail and how he went over every, dotted every I, crossed every T. And so that must have been awesome to just see it firsthand when he's taking on a project of that scope.
He was very meticulous even then. It was... He was a bit cantankerous too, but he wanted it. He wanted it right, and we got it right.
Very cool. Next one, McCoy Tyner.
Yeah, that was the record date I did with him. Was McCoy Tyner plays the music of Burt Bacharach.
Oh, I have that CD. It's a great record.
Yeah, that was a fun record. I didn't have a lot to do on that. It was small orchestra. I did get to sub with McCoy Tyner's big band a couple of times for John Clark. So that was fun. I did never perform with that group, but I subbed on a couple of rehearsals. But yeah, McCoy, I mean, as a pianist too, he's a huge idol of mine. So.
Herbie Hancock.
The Herbie date was actually with the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
We did a record with him called Gershwin's World.
Oh, I have that record too. I didn't realize it was Orpheus. I got to start going over these CDs. Jeez.
Yeah. Well, he did his own version of Ravel Piano Concerto, where he actually kind of just improvised over the chords, which I'm not sure what Ravel would have thought of that. Maybe he would have liked it.
He probably would have loved it.
He probably would have loved it. So that was, another thing where I didn't have a lot to do, but just to be able to, be in the room with Herbie and recording all that. And that was my first Grammy as a sideman. Was that record?
Nice. Yeah, I mean, to me, he's top 5 American musicians of all time. So just to be in the room with him has to be something amazing. Last one of these. You talked about how the French horn's not in the jazz band typically, but you did play with the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra at Lincoln Center.
Yeah, and that was always, I've done that a few times. Really, really fun. We one of the projects was the music of Gil Evans. And just to, work with Wynton and that group. Talk about a meticulous bunch. Wynton is incredibly detail-oriented and runs a very tight ship. But, it pays off. That group sounds phenomenal all the time.
Yeah, of course.
So a few projects. I actually did one project where somehow I ended up playing first horn, and Wynton asked me to get the whole section for 4 horns. So, and I got principal horn of the Met, Eric Roski, to sit in the section with me when he was having fun because he didn't get to do a lot of jazz. So, but that was fun.
That's cool. Let's talk about yet another element of your career is your teaching side of things, and you've been at Princeton University for over a decade now, right?
About 10, 11 years.
Yeah. What's that like for you?
I enjoy it. I really do. I mean, Princeton isn't really known as a music school, but I mean the kids there are really super motivated. They're all incredibly talented, but they've they've decided 2 or 3 years before I get to them they're not going to be horn players. They're going to be scientists or doctors or whatever. So it's a little bittersweet, although I've had a couple of them decide to go into music, but it's still fun to work with them, and I do enjoy that side of music. I find teaching a lot more actually draining than actually playing. I feel like to be a good teacher, it takes a lot out of you, and I always I would be exhausted after a full day of teaching. I just wiped out, but fulfilling too. If you feel like you're connecting and making some headway. So
I couldn't agree more. I mean, the times I've gone in and taught, for a week, subbing for somebody at a conservatory or whatnot. It's unbelievably draining. I have such respect for teachers in general, and you got to have the passion for it, and just respect goes out. And same thing for band directors and all. I mean, boy, that's like way more draining than playing to me anyway. Okay, I want to talk about this next thing, which you introduced me to when we had a conversation last week. But the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra is in the middle of a big commission for you, a piece that 4 composers are contributing 1 movement each. It's quite, and maybe I'll leave you to describe how it came about, but it's what a wonderful project. And you encouraged me to check out Paquito de Rivera's Dolly in the Tropics, which I did immediately after you told me about it. For those of you who have not heard this, which perhaps you haven't, check it out. Paquito de Rivera, Chris Komer, Dolly in the Tropics. It's one of the movements. Beautiful piece that Paquito wrote. Spectacular playing by Paquito and Chris. Tell us about this commission and about that piece.
Sure. I feel like we're kind of breaking some new ground here. I don't know of any other major symphony orchestra that has commissioned a sort of a jazz concerto for their principal horn. I mean, it's rare that they commission any concerto for their principal horns, but to do a jazz concerto with it'll be for full orchestra and rhythm section, jazz trio, piano, bass, and drums. When I won the principal horn job, we negotiated into the contract this concerto, and I wasn't sure they would go for it, but it was something that they didn't even blink. They thought it was a great idea, and we immediately got to work on it. I got to pick the composers. I got to pick the theme. I wasn't sure how to tie them all together, but we picked the artist Salvador Dali as kind of the thread. I asked the composers to try to pick an art piece, either painting or sculpture of Dali, to you use a little bit of inspiration from, and so that's the thread. But the four composers are Paquito de Rivera, Christian McBride, who everyone knows Christian, and he runs a great big band, composes for big band. This will be his first work for full orchestra, so I'm anxious to hear what he is going to do with that. Gary Morgan is another composer who runs a great 20-piece Latin Brazilian big band in New York that I play in, and I've been friends with Gary for a long time now. And the fourth composer is a very good friend of mine, Vivian Lee, who lives in London, and she went to Mannes in New York for composition, and has gotten more into bluegrass. She plays mandolin and piano, and is working in London as a bluegrass and gypsy jazz artist, but still writing music, and had already written me a really great trio, a horn trio for piano, violin, and horn, with some improvising in that. And it was so successful that I really wanted her to do a whole movement. So it's going to be next June, not this June, but the following June, finale of our season. And I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, it's such a cool sounding project. And once again, everybody check out the piece. It doesn't involve the orchestra yet, but Paquito's band
did an arrangement for his small group. Originally, the idea was to have me come out and sit in with him if he was playing around the New York area with his small group, and then COVID hit. So we decided to do a video, and we all recorded our parts separately and flew it in.
Yeah, the track sounds tremendous. But kudos to the New Jersey Symphony for having the courage to delve into jazz for French horn and to go with the commissions. And kudos to you for getting that in your contract. And that's like we were saying, a win-win situation for both parties. So we look forward to hearing that. I'm sure they're going to record it, and hopefully some video, and get to see that. Let's talk about an entirely another side of your career. It's starting to piss me off how many things you do well, actually. But your solo piano CD, it's entitled Traveling Music. You talked about being around piano growing up and your college years at Wichita State. Are you still, I think you were mentioning you're still interested in pursuing that as part of your portfolio?
Yeah, I still play a lot of piano. In fact, in my free time, I would say that's what I do more than anything right now. I invested in a really nice grand piano that's in my tiny apartment, and that was a really good move, to get a fine instrument that I could play whenever I wanted. I decided when I bought the piano that it was only going to be for fun. I already had a career as a horn player, and I I was like, well, this is just going to be different. It's not. I'm not going to like decide. Oh, well, now I have a piano. Now I got to make money playing the piano. And I just made it a rule that I was only going to play for fun. And if I wasn't having fun, I wouldn't play. And if I got frustrated, I'd just get up from the keyboard and stop playing. So that was kind of the way that worked. And for years and years, I just would play for fun. But that got to be, as I got a little better, that became more frequently. And then I had done enough soundproofing on my apartment, I could play the piano pretty much any time I wanted. So I was playing a lot after I got home from the show or whatever I was doing, and would play for hours. And I got to the point I was writing some tunes and improvising a lot. And I said, well, let's just see if I can get a good sound. Let's try to record some of this. And I tried recording myself. It was terrible. So I got some friends to come record it. And we had enough really good material that we decided to make a CD out of it. So that was, 2009. So I'm about due for another one. But I think that another one is on the horizon. And I've been playing enough, especially during the pandemic. I think the best thing for me during this whole year was the time I've had to put into playing the horn, but most of all for me was just piano time. I feel my playing has improved a lot during this year. So another
cool.
one's on the horizon.
Well, we'll look forward to that as well. That's great. We were just talking about it when we were having a quick bite of lunch, but tell us about Artist Refuge at Thunderhead. I know that's one of your great passions of life, maybe right up there with music, but tell us what's going on out in Montana for you.
I'm happy to talk your ear off about that one. Well, I don't know what really happened, why I became obsessed with this. Well, I actually do kind of know what happened. I mean, it was after 9/11. That affected me deeply. I was in New York when that happened, and I just felt like I had to do something, drastically different or new, or try to do just something that would change the course of my life a little bit. So I got the idea of what would I, if I had 20 acres, what would I do with it? And I the first thing that came to my mind was I would build something for multiple people to come use, artists to come use. And then I thought, well, okay, so that sounds like a good idea. Let's start looking for a spot to do it. And it was still kind of a dream, but I would write about it a lot. And then I started looking all over the country for a spot to do it. And I looked intently on the internet, and then every summer I would take some weeks to drive around the country and check out some properties in person. So 4.5 years later, I was able to buy this 60-acre piece of land in the middle of the National Forest in the mountains in Montana. And that was 2007, so we've been working on this for about 13 years now. And it's, it was raw land, and I remember talking about it to everybody, what I was going to do with this 60 acres in the middle of nowhere, and everyone thought I was crazy. A lot of people still do, but it's actually happening. We've built 7 structures now, and we've been able to start raising some money for it. And I have a lot of people coming every summer, volunteers from all over the world. Not from all over the world last summer, although we still had about 50 people come through and volunteer their time to help. Basically, we're still in the building phase. The summer before, though, we had 14 people from foreign countries come to Thunderhead and help us build this project. And the sort of the end goal is to have kind of a home away from home for professional performing artists, but creative people in general. You don't have to be a full-time artist to be involved, to come. But I want it to be very diverse, and I want eventually there to be a 2 or 3 week Festival of the Arts where we all gather, a lot of people camping out, and we just celebrate music and art and experiment, collaborate in new ways. I think another reason why I decided to do this was living in New York City. I felt strangely segregated from all the other artists. I have my classical scene and my jazz scene, but even doing Broadway shows, we've done a lot of Broadway shows. We don't really mix with the cast or the dancers. It's all,
Sure, yeah.
very separated for some reason. And in New York, it's high concentration of artists, but I feel like we're all so concerned with our own little scene, survival, and our group of friends are just the people that we work with. And we weren't collaborating on a level that I felt like could really happen and would be beneficial. So one of the things I realized, well, if we're all in the middle of the wilderness and we can't look at our cell phones and we can't get on the internet because we have no cell phone or internet out there. And we don't have to worry about, paying the bills right away, and a lot of the distractions fall away, and you really can get to know someone on a very personal level, and know more about what they do as an artist, and then start to think about ways that maybe we could try this. So I'm very hopeful that that's one of the things that could come out of this project is some new ways of collaboration. From artists of very separate classifications of art, a flamenco dancer collaborating with, a sculptor, just very off-the-wall types of things that you could think of, but and just a place to recoup. Really, also, a lot of artists live in the middle of the dense cities where it can be stressful. And I feel like being in nature is a very healing effect. I know it definitely heals me and gets me ready for another year in New York City. So, I feel like people could focus on their art or take a break from their art, out there. And so that's another aspect of it, but it's kind of my life's project, really. This and it will eventually kind of take over everything, I think. But I envision a full symphony orchestra out there at some point, and an education program, hosting workshops. One of the first things I want to do is either a horn camp, like a jazz French horn camp, or jazz brass camp, or just a brass camp, a comprehensive brass camp. We're all we could be outdoors. The weather's great in the summer, so that's probably 2 or 3 years away now. But and it also did it just to save my own life, just to be out there working with my hands, getting dirty, learning new building techniques. We're using some pretty obscure alternative building methods. We do have a website, thunderheadrefuge.com, with lots of great photos of what we're doing. It's videos that we made out there. So I encourage everyone to check it out and get in touch with me if they're interested.
Nice.
So.
Man, well, you clearly have a lot of passion for it, and good for you for dreaming big, and I remember when you said that back then, 13 years
You
ago,
thought
what
I
it
was
was.
crazy,
I
too.
did think you were crazy, but I still think you're crazy, but in a really good way. No, I thought it was an ambitious undertaking, and it's really impressive to see where you've gone with it, and it'll be impressive to see where you take it over the next couple decades,
You'll be
3
out there, Mike.
decades.
You'll be out there at some point. You will be out there.
Well, Chris, this has been a thrill today. We've had so few French horn players on the show, and to get somebody of your stature has given us a lot of credibility in the French horn world. So we really appreciate your time today. As we close out, I always like to ask, especially somebody like yourself who's a young artist already, but obviously a very successful one, what your advice might be for young players coming up, whether it's specific to French horn or just musicians in general. You've shed a lot of light on a lot of subjects today, but if you have any things that you would share on that front, would be great.
Yeah. Follow your bliss. Be persistent. You're going to get knocked down a lot in this business. It's a very, you got to really grow a tough skin. Just if you're really passionate about it, just don't give up. You're going to have walls dropped in front of you, doors slammed in your face. But there's going to be another door. You go around the wall. There's always another step that you can take, even in the face of some pretty extreme adversity, especially when you're taking auditions. Wow. to get a job in an orchestra, it is really hard on your confidence. I mean, it's the same for a Broadway performer who's trying to get into a cast. You go to 100 auditions and you're dismissed instantly at 95 of them. And it's the same with orchestra auditions. It's a lot of no. It's a lot of thank you, not what we want. So you have to be prepared for that. And it's hard. I'm not going to lie. It's hard. Even as successful as I have been, there's been a lot of times where I was very down and depressed and just wondering how I was going to get up and carry on and keep trying and keep going. So just realize that you can get past it if you're persistent and just get up. You get knocked down, you just got to get up and keep going. I mean, I wouldn't trade it for the world. A career in music. I mean, I get to travel the world. I never dreamed. I was a kid growing up in Kansas, getting to travel the world. I would have never dreamed of that. I'm supposed to play at the Kathmandu Jazz Festival in November in Nepal. I never dreamed of playing at the Monterey. Soloing in front of 1,000 people at the Monterey Jazz Festival. Are you kidding me? On the French horn, But if you're passionate and you really put your heart and soul and your mind and put your whole self into it, you can really do it. So.
Yeah, great stuff. Well, I hope everybody's enjoyed this as much as I've had. I had a ball today talking to Chris. Chris will also be doing a hip bone U lesson for us. Really cool stuff, talking about balancing classical performance and jazz and commercial performance and how to navigate through that. I'm super looking forward to hearing it myself. We look forward to his concerto with the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra coming out a year from this June. As always, check him out here in New York, and we look forward to seeing all of you next time on Bone2Pick.